Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me, as always, is the very musical Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hi.
I don't know what song to sing, like "Hello, Miami" or something like that. You make me musical.
Oh, my goodness. So, Jennifer, we have with us a very special guest that is near and dear to us. Would you care to do the introduction?
Sure. Today, we are lucky to have Ruben Ruban, affectionately known as Ruben the Cuban, and he is a senior advisor at SVN here in Southeast Miami, and he specializes in mixed-use developments and asset repositioning as the senior advisor, but he's also president of CCIM's Miami chapter, which has been doing amazing things in our commercial real estate community. And he is also the host of another podcast called the CRE Cafecito Podcast. With his Panama hat and his cigar in pocket, he epitomizes the Miami Cuban flair and brings that sense of warmth and culture to all of his interactions. So, Ruben, thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have you here. And I think this episode is definitely going to be very Miami, very 305.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very, very much, Jennifer and Fernando. I'm so excited to be here. And I've been listening to you guys. I feel like, those people that call on the radio, it's like, oh, long time listener, first time caller. So I think since you guys launched and you told me you're launching this podcast and so forth, I've been listening to most of your episodes. So thank you. So I'm always looking forward to seeing the descriptive word that Fernando's going to use to introduce Jennifer. So it's
I love it.
Musical.
So
very nice.
Yeah. So let's jump right in. The reason for the musical is because the three of us were chatting right before getting started, and Ruben mentioned that he plays the bass. And so I told him, I'm not going to lie, immediately that song, "It's All About the Bass," about the bass, started going through my head. So you're welcome, Fernando. I gave you.
There you go.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your bass playing, about Chicago, your move here, etc. Just tell us what makes Ruben the Cuban tick.
That's a loaded question. Well, thank you. I was born in Chicago to a Cuban family that in the 60s came through the Freedom Tower. Somehow somebody asked my father if he knew anybody in the United States, and the Catholic Church, I think, sent him up to Chicago, where he knew some people from Cuba that they're from Guantanamo. That's where I was born. So I was first generation, the first one here from the family to kind of bridge that gap to the American dream. Grew up in the Midwest. When I was about age 5, sneaking out of the house, my parents decided to move out of Chicago proper and moved to Southwest Michigan to a small town that had one stoplight. They're like, you can't get in trouble here. Little did they know, it just gave me more room to get in trouble. But anyway, musical family. We all played, especially from my dad's side of the family, it was all piano and one other instruments, including pots and pans whenever we got together. So it was very interesting being in a small town in Southwest Michigan with a very loud Cuban family. So that was my upbringing, pretty much in the Midwest. I always had music as part of my DNA, let's say, growing up and so forth. And as I was mentioning with the in-ears, that I love it, or I went to the bass as kind of like my instrument. My father, being this musical person, he would buy instruments all the time and just bring them home. One time I came home from school, I was like in, 5th or 6th grade, and there's this box on the side of the wall of the living room, and I was like, "Pops, what's that?" And he's like, "It's a bass guitar." then I was like, well, buy me book one, because I was already playing a little piano and a trombone and baritone and so forth. And so I started playing the bass along with him. And next thing you know, I'm doing little garage bands and so forth. When I was forwarded to in real estate in Chicago, Chicago is a very giving kind of city. And so I ended up being part of Liquidated Damages, that's still going on over 25 years as a charity band comprised of all commercial real estate contractors, architects, developers, brokers, different folks. And we did a lot of different charity work. I also played with another band called Square Feet, apropos for, again, real estate centric charity band. So shout out to Square Feet and Liquidated Damages.
We're going to have to see if I can find them on YouTube and provide links in the show notes, because I think that's awesome.
I'll send you a link to probably the we used to do a charity called the House of at the House of Blues for City of Hope. And so we've raised literally millions of dollars for City of Hope it's a children's hospital. And I had the privilege to play with several different, let's call it musical celebrities. So I played with Jim Peterick at the House of Blues in Chicago. And Jim Peterick wrote The Eye of the Tiger. So we played The Eye of the Tiger. I'll send you that link. Or you can look it up, Liquidated Damage.
I've got it.
Liquidated
That's
Damages,
awesome.
Eye of the Tiger. And you'll see Jim Peterick with his guitar that had it looks like fire, the fire flare coming out of the guitar kind of thing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So yeah.
So Ruben, tell us a little bit about how you go from, obviously your passion for music, but then how did you discover real estate, commercial real estate specifically? How do you enter this world?
So a great question. I did live in the 90s. I lived in Orlando for a stint because my parents started making the migration in the late 80s. We grew up owning foster care homes and so forth, just, working. And my parents got into the assisted living facilities, and they started opening and buying some in Orlando in the late 80s, early 90s. And I made my way down to work for my father one summer and just never went back up to the Midwest. I tasted a little bit of freedom. And I told Mom and Pops, I was like, I'm not coming back. I'm staying down here. And during that time, when they finally moved down, I ended up getting my real estate license in the 90s. Did a little bit of timeshare sales, believe it or not. That's when I first got my real estate license. And then I wanted to get into medical sales, which I eventually did. And in the meantime, I hung up my license with a residential, just mom and pop guys, Del Sol Realty in the 90s in Orlando. I sold a bunch of homes. I hated it, but I was just, I had people I knew, and I remember the broker telling me, he's like, hey, you can do this really well. I'm like, oh, I'm just getting lucky, I guess. But a good buddy of mine, he was also in residential, but when I was leaving to go into medical sales, he was transferring into commercial real estate. And he told me, he's like, Ruben, you would love commercial real estate. And I'm like, hey, I just got a job offer with this company to do medical sales. I want to, in the 90s, I want to go, pursue this medical sales. But I always had that in the back of my head about this commercial real estate. Fast forward to like 2005, and I was saying, I'm going to make the switch to commercial real estate because it's a very entrepreneurial. And I remember telling my father this, and he's like, you are crazy. Está loco. You have a salary, you have your benefits, you have all the bells and whistles of more of a corporate type of job, and you want to go to some place that all they're going to give you is a desk and a phone, and that's it. I was like, but Pops, I'm going to be selling commercial real estate in Chicago. He's like, tú no entiende. You come from a Cuban family. You don't know anybody in that world, and it's a whole different thing. Well, that was about 20 years ago, and haven't looked back. So that was kind of like the transition. It was just something innate that I always had in me. I like the investment side, I like entrepreneurial side. I was very early in my career when 2008 hit, and so I got a really good dose of reality really quick. 2006 was really good for me as like my rookie year, but again, that time things were a lot easier, and I had a lot of deals done. Especially being downtown Chicago. 2007, things started slowing down. By 2008, I was literally selling the kitchen sink. So I was selling anything I could. So yeah, so that's a transition. I made it through there. I'm very, very fortunate to have some really good mentors and some really good people in my life that kind of saw something in me and were able to help guide me through those times and give me a lot of good advice. In fact, I often attribute one of my mentors. His name is John Wadsworth, but he goes by the Dart Man, and he's the one that gave me in 2006 or seven, right around there. He gave me, your name's Ruben the Cuban. And he introduced me to everybody as Ruben the Cuban and stuff. So yeah, that's how it kind of. And then just tying that together. When I was trying to get into commercial real estate, I didn't know anybody in Chicago in commercial real estate, so I started literally calling different companies and presidents of different and whoever I would read in the local newspapers and so forth. There was a lady. She was the president of a pretty good local firm. Her name is Linda Day. And I remember calling Linda and having a call with her. And she's like, Ruben, I think you're going to do great things. You're going to be really good at this. But I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have anybody that could take on somebody that's brand new to the business. But let's keep in touch. And to this day, Linda and I've kept in touch. She's now moved from Chicago into California. And she's the founder of the Broker List. And so, and you may have met her when you guys went to the CREI, because she's part of the founder of the CREI. And when I coming out of COVID, and I'm going all over the place here, but coming out of COVID, fast forward, to 21, I think was the very first CREI in Lake Tahoe. And Linda goes, Ruben, you got to come to this thing. And of course, this is like the first conference coming out of COVID, so I'm ready to go anywhere. So we fly out to Lake Tahoe. There's a small group of us there. And Linda introduced me to some people there, and there's I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he had his CCIM pin, and I told Linda, I was like, you know what? I took a couple classes for my CCIM, I just haven't finished it. And Linda looks at me, she goes, Ruben, you have to finish this thing. And I was sitting there like, it's not like one of those things like you have to because it's going to radically change. But yes, it's one of those things that you put in your head and your mind is like, I want to achieve this, and I just have not finished it. And it's kind of. It's one of those stories. I actually took my first couple of CCIM classes in Chicago in like 2007. I didn't finish my exam or earn my PIN till 2023. There was a couple of gap years there. So that kind of ties in the whole journey of getting into commercial real estate. And in Chicago, I was able to learn a lot on the brokerage side. I started working with developers, got into the other side of the table, as you would say, on the development side. Worked on a lot of projects in Chicago. Started off with some small 9-unit walk-up type thing, and up to a 228 unit project, more institutional grade. Was very fortunate to learn a lot. Spent a lot of time at City Hall. I was the guy that would sit there in front of the different neighborhood associations and get all the arrows thrown at you about, this building's going to increase traffic and it's going to do this, and had to learn as you go kind of thing. But very, very, very excited and thankful and feel blessed to have those experience. And I think that drives me today to help others as well, especially as they start getting learning and launching in this new career.
So you have brokerage and development experience in Chicago as well as in South Florida. What is it about Miami and I guess more the broader market for our listeners, Southeast Florida, that is, uniquely attractive to investors right now? There are cranes everywhere. Yeah. We're like one of the hottest markets.
So in 2015, I started working with a firm. Well, it's a school, international school out of Peru. And they're here in Miami. They were leasing some space, but they wanted to buy. And I got introduced to them via another firm that I was affiliated with. And they that's when I kind of started really studying the Miami market, like 15, 16. And I started seeing, as a developer, kind of through those lenses, what was going on here, how things were growing and the opportunity. A lot of people, when I started looking down here locally, they were like, Miami's already too developed. And I'm like, no, it's not. This is a blank canvas in my eyes coming from Chicago. And long story short, that school ended up buying 3 acres right near Dolphin Mall there in Doral. And it blew my mind with that deal because I worked with them for about a year and a half. And allegedly their budget was something in that $3 to $4 million to kind of buy something. We ended up finding something that was closer to $9 million. And I was like, well, this is a long shot. They turned around and they're like, fine. Like a week later, they wired $9 million from Peru and it's sitting at some attorney's office here, and we closed right away. And I'm like, to do that type of deal in Chicago, from with foreign investments and so forth, was something that was not as easy. So first thing I saw was like, hey, the growth here is not just locally, but on an international level. To do those type of deals here in Miami is something amazing. Second, when I moved, ended up making the decision to move down. It was 2019. So I moved down here, and within just months, besides people saying, hey, now Ruben the Cuban makes sense, now you're in Miami, a lot of my clients started looking and calling. It's like, hey, we were looking for this, we're looking for that. Everybody wanted to buy down here because I think, again, the fundamentals, if you look at just the basic fundamentals where Miami was and still is, relatively speaking, on a national and global level, I think we're now approaching some of the pricing that I would say, compares to the New York or the Parises or, some of these other places. But still in 2019, 2020, COVID hits, obviously, and we have even more eyes looking down here. So the fundamentals of the pricing that exists, you couple that with the environment that we have here, that we have sunshine most of the year. Yes, we deal with a hurricane from time to time, but at least there's ample warning for that. And then some of the other just attractions that are coming down here, very business friendly environment for most businesses to move down here to do business. And then now with the expansion of technology that you can literally pick up and be just about anywhere and still run your business. So I think South Florida, Miami, and that just is becoming a magnet in the U.S. to bring people down here. And having that foundation that I had from Chicago, and then having some of those clients, like my first couple of deals that I did here were, right around that COVID time, I sold a building. I had a client from Chicago say, hey, developer, they have a tenant. It's another university looking for about 50,000 square feet to move their current school in the North Miami, Miramar area. And this is, I want to say it was like 2020 or 2021, right around there. And they didn't know where to move them. Could I help them find the needle in the haystack? Because they only had like a 1-mile radius that they could move because they already had an existing license. I found them a space. It was a building. It was 53,000 square feet that was vacant for lease. And when I called the leasing agent, he's like, no, they don't want to sell. I was like, well, listen, let's put the conversation in. What would they sell it for? The owners ended up entertaining the idea, and they're like, well, let's set up a meeting. It happens to be that the ownership was out of Chicago for the building. The buyer they were like less than a couple blocks away in Chicago, downtown Chicago, but they both ended up down here meeting. We ended up closing on the transaction. They bought the building, and now the school's operating in that space. So again, going back to the foreign capital and all these deals that are happening from outside of Florida coming to Florida, I think it's just those the moons and stars aligning for South Florida, and I think it will continue because you have two trains of thoughts in my view. You either really really love and you're bullish on Miami and South Florida, or I'm staying away. This is already priced out. I'm not sure when the music's going to stop and no chairs are going to be left.
That's a great point. So do you think we're, with all the cranes that you see driving around everywhere, do you think we're still in a growth phase? Or are we, I guess, entering more of what you would call a strategic phase where people have to be more selective? It's harder to make deals pencil out, et cetera.
I would say we're definitely on the early side of the strategic phase. That growth phase, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I remember listening to former Mayor Francis Suarez a couple of times talk about the growth between like 2015 and 2020 or something like that, and the valuation that Miami real estate, just all amount, residential, commercial, the city proper, went through almost like 2x in those 5-7 years or something like that. That was probably the opportunity. Just people just going gangbusters. Now with the fundamentals of some, you have to be a little more selective, because I think that's where I believe the bid ask spread that we've been seeing throughout the nation is really really magnified here in Miami. There's still a lot of sellers right now that want to achieve pricing from 22, 23 when things were really going high, and they're not willing to come down because they're trying to be opportunistic. And I think we're finally seeing some of that compress a little bit, between this bid-ask spread, because some of the sellers are finally realizing, hey, if they need to transact, we need to meet the market, and some of the sellers I think are also getting a little more comfortable where things are going. So, or the buyers, I would say, and they're coming up a little bit, so we're getting a little closer. So that's the strategic side of things. I was reading one of the articles not too long ago that on the office side, that's been the story for Miami, that we're now achieving like $225 per square foot for leasing. And I mean, that is incredible, to think that Miami. So the problem in Miami is not so much the oversupply, or it's just there's a lack of supply, and we're having these, very high net high dollars companies that are able to spend that to come down here to the Miami and, West Palm all the way down kind of thing. So it's not just here in Miami.
Are there any submarkets within Miami? Because we say Miami, but we're really talking about all of Miami-Dade County, Broward, and probably Palm Beach when we talk about this area. Are there any submarkets that you think are still in the growth phase?
I think the opportunity, as we're seeing, there's that mega project that is coming up, and I think it's in is it Little River? It's at about $850 million mixed use project that's coming up. So you can kind of see how Miami, going to the Miami proper, Miami-Dade, it's the expansion, is going beyond the Edgewater, Wynwood, now it's moving northward. And we've been hearing for the last, I would say, 18, 24 months, how Homestead on the south side has been doing a lot of growth there, because people are looking, obviously between here and West Palm Beach, there's nothing to the east. We have a lot of water.
Right.
And, to the west, we have a bunch of alligators that you can only go so far. So we have this stretch that we have to redevelop, I would say. And I would say is the growth opportunity there. You still have to be strategic, but some of those landowners or people there, again, are going with what they saw happen. And so they might be asking for some astronomical pricing that's not realistic, but soon realize, hey, we can assemble for a certain amount of money and make this pencil out. So I would say a little bit like North Miami, so like River North, River North is Chicago.
North of Little River.
North of Little River. Thank you. That's what I was trying to say.
I gotcha.
Thank you. It's probably like some areas. Obviously, we hear a lot of like Little Haiti and that sort of thing for the industrial park is what I'm hearing a lot of rumbles about. Overtown and the downtown area still has some space there to grow. And as the downtown, that Brickell and downtown migrates west, it's getting into Overtown and so forth. So there's a lot of people looking, a lot of the developers I talk to, they're looking in that area, trying to make those numbers pencil out, so forth.
Tell us a little bit about what when you're a commercial real estate broker, one of the great things is that you can sort of specialize in so many different asset classes. There's nothing cookie cutter about commercial real estate. What led you to focus on the development side of the business and on asset reallocation? And also for those that are listening that maybe are, young in the business, what are the special skill sets that you have to develop in order to be in that side of the commercial real estate, world?
Well, thanks. I guess I like headaches. That's all this gray hair you see here. Or wear hats because I have no hair. I've lost it all. Because development, especially, and I don't know, early on mixed use. I guess in Chicago, you see a lot of mixed use. Mixed use in most urban settings is a very common way of utilizing space. So you can activate the retail on the ground level, and then above it you can go up and then you either have office or some sort of multifamily or something up there. I even now hearing about some sort of industrial mixed use. You have some industrial on the bottom with some office up top or something like that. So I've been a fan of mixed use for a long time, and I've often wondered, and even early on, why don't like suburban areas like to use mixed use? Because like you only see mixed use mostly in like urban core areas, and now I think now, because of pricing and so forth, you're starting to see that. And if you look at Europe, that much older, they've been using mixed use for a long time. So I think that idea of mixed use, and then on the development side, really excited me to say, hey, I can help reposition or redevelop certain areas or certain buildings to do something and have a better and higher use for that particular building. Not saying that I think, oh, all the buildings need to be knocked down and turned into something new. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying a lot of times it's existing building, but just you can change it up and work with it. The whole redevelopment in 2008, 9, 10, there was a lot of projects about redevelopment because development costs, nobody wanted to give construction loan. I worked closely with construction firm out of Chicago, Leopardo Construction, during that time that I remember making 120 calls to lenders to try to keep some of the projects they were working on just cash flowing or, with the construction loan. So it's not saying, oh, you can always do construction, but redevelopment and so forth. So those things about utilizing the space was something that drew me to development and then how to fit in, I guess, the mixed use part of thing. I don't know if that's answering your question, Fernando, but
Yeah.
it's kind of that's one of the things that excited me a lot. And for somebody new, what do you need to have? I think was the second part of the question.
Right.
And everybody talks about AI, everybody talks about really, being really tech savvy and so forth. But I think almost more importantly for anybody new is to develop just the people skills, because especially the young folks now are growing up with their phones in their hands. And they sit there and they will send these little short text messages and communicate that way and build relationships that way. And those relationships, I think, are very, I don't want to say shallow, but they're very fragile because it's not the same when you sit eyeball to somebody and get the energy and talk and communicate and transmit what your thoughts are in the medium when you're actually speaking versus just a little short text. So I think absolutely get all the education you can, learn all the technology. AI is here, it's not going anywhere. It's definitely going to be changing and revolutionizing a lot of things and how we do them, but it will never take away, in my opinion, the communication and the people skills that you need to read body language, to understand, hey, this person may be having a bad day. Maybe this is not the right time to ask a certain question. Or maybe ask the questions like, hey, is everything okay? And understand how to be personable. Those are skills that I think are very are going by the wayside for some, especially some of the younger people I see in this business, because they're very good at getting out there and sending you a text and bombarding your LinkedIn and sending you all this message. And we're seeing all this stuff, but they don't want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you and actually talk face to face. And when they do, it's kind of like a very, the sky is blue. It's a beautiful day. The skills to actually have a conversation are going away.
Yeah, and I think that there is in the world of development, it's like it's like going into hand-to-hand battle. It's going to be a long process. There's going to be plenty of things that go right, plenty of things that go wrong, and it's addressing those little hiccups that can mount to be big things are going to be important, and how you convey that information is incredibly impactful to the deal and to everything. So for sure. So when you decide to go from Chicago to Miami, you already had done deals here. Did that kind of make it easier to transition, or was there a transitional period? Once you made the permanent move to a new market?
Yes. So I did a lot of studying before I moved here, partly because of that particular client. I got my license reactivated down here and all that sort of thing. And so it was always like in the back of my mind, it's like, well, I hate to say this, I'm going to publicly say this. I often, and for most of my life, said I will never move to Miami. And
I did too.
So there you go. It's one of those things, never say never. And here I am. So, but yes, there was definitely I had a little bit, a grasp on it, but it's never the same thing. You can study online and you can come on the air. I used to come to Miami frequently to go do site visits and so forth, but it's not the same to actually live here, boots on the ground and being involved. Getting to know the players are, getting to know who the developers are or what's going on, getting to know the local market, getting to know where the coffee stands and the cigar places and, your favorite that's all part of that living here and actually being part of here. That, when I was in Chicago and somebody would say, oh yeah, meet me at Sergio's and then, knowing the story behind Sergio's that he actually, lives in Kendall and, that kind of stuff. and just some of the intricacies of that. So yeah, there's definitely a growth period during that COVID time. That's kind of like what I took advantage of. I was like trying to, as much as possible, get out to learn about Miami, and where I was like, I'm not going to be stuck in the house and so forth. So it gave me a chance to kind of drive. A friend of mine, you guys I'm sure know, Bob Knackle, talks often about during COVID, he was able to really just map out, downtown Manhattan area, just like never before. I wasn't as diligent as he was, going building by building and so forth. But I did try to get out there and try to learn, because for me it was a new market and so forth, and learn a little bit about the area, and just drive, turn the GPS off and see where this road leads me to, kind of thing, just to try to get going. So yeah, there's definitely a learning curve during there. I was very fortunate that I had clients from Chicago that were looking down this way, that also helped with the kind of getting here with the bases. Also, the platform that I was part of, or that I am part of, SVN, the partners, or the managing partners, Scott Mazel, he from Chicago. Well, he was born in Boca, lived in Chicago for 20 some odd years. And we opened up the Boca office in March of 2020. So right in the middle of that COVID split, there was, I had really good support, and I had really, it wasn't just me, myself, and I was surrounded by some good people to help all of us kind of elevate our game and move forward. But yeah, there's definitely a learning curve. Now we're 2026, and CCIM has helped me a lot over the last 2-3 years as well, to get to know more people, be more involved with different organizations, get to know you guys. And then luckily, you guys you two are doing this podcast that help people get to know who you guys are a little bit. So I feel like I've known you guys for a long time, is listening to the podcast. So.
We have known each other for a long time.
Time has flown.
Yes.
So not only do you have developed deep roots in South Florida, but you've also providing a great service, presiding over our CCIM Miami chapter. Tell us a little bit about that journey and how this experience has been for you thus far.
Absolutely. Going back to Linda Day in 2021 at the CRE, the first CREI, when she's like, "Oh, you got to go finish your CCIM," I decided to take her up on that, and kind of really thought about it as like, the CCIM pin for me now. It was something that's one of those things that you set out to do early on, and sometimes you go off the path, and then you come back and you're like, I want to do this. So 2022, I ended up taking the last couple classes that I needed to take. And then they give a CCIM, you have to do this grueling 6-hour test at the end of the whole journey, as they say. And so I ended up doing that spring of 2023 in Boston. Out of the 6 hours, I used up 5 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds. So it was like, it was a tough test, but thank goodness I was able to pass. And I had a lot of people that helped get me ready in some courses. But during 2022, I started getting involved with CCI in Miami. Our district was growing. In 23, we started growing more. And then, like I tell many young folks and many people ask me about CCIM, and as you guys know, being involved with like Miami Commercial and so forth, getting involved makes all the difference. You can join a number of different associations, but till you start rolling up your sleeves and actually getting involved, that's where the magic starts happening. And so by 23 and 24, I started, getting on the board, getting involved with the programming, getting more involved with different things around CCA in Miami. And then last year came up the opportunity to be president-elect and then take over, which was a little bit about, a little bit of drinking from a fire hose. But I've been very, very blessed to have a great team, great people to help, like Robert Palacio and Jackie Cruz Bustillo and Sonia and Tony and Frank. I mean, the whole board has been great, been really, really supportive. We work really well together. And so I'm really excited. CCIM is kind of tiered off into different levels. So we have what we call the Institute. So that they're really the ones that drive the education and a lot of the programs and so forth. And, they're the mothership, if you will. They're at the very top. Then Florida is a little bit different than the rest of the country and on the other chapters, because Florida is actually a Florida chapter. And we're one of few chapters that have districts. So Florida, since we have the most amount of CCIMs in any state, we have over 1,100 CCIM members here in the state of Florida, we're divided up into 8 chapters. So Miami-Dade, Miami is just one of the 8 districts that's part of the state. So we have different levels. So we're the boots in the ground doing the events, working with the state, that the state makes sure kind of like everything's running smoothly, and then working, also with the institute that provide a lot of the educational formatting and an educational platform. CCIM has been known throughout the years as a very just high standard, as they say, the gold standard of commercial real estate, based on the education and so forth that they provide. But as we, I would say, grow, and to go back to Jennifer, if we're on the growth or we're more strategic, I would say CCIM is currently more in a strategic, and we're trying to really show that, everybody knows that we have the educational pillar, and we do really well at CCIM as a whole to help with the growth of your career. But then there's the third part is deal making, and how do we leverage CCIM to help with your career in the deal making side of things. So there's a very strong focus for CCIM Miami and the state and the institute to really elevate and bring light to the deal making side of things, because it's good to have the education, but you can have your PhD, or you can have any acronym after your name, but if you're not able to execute and put that into practice, in our case, into deal making, the value of that, your return on all the time that you spend on education and so forth, really doesn't come into practice. So we're really focusing on that to help elevate our members and give them a platform for deal making. So really excited about everything that's going on with CCIM and the CCIM Miami and the Florida chapter as well.
In terms of the deal making side, what are you seeing in terms of deals coming in to our area? Is there anything that we're currently overbuilding and or underbuilding?
Well, overbuilding, it's I would say a sort of two sides there. I know multifamily, everybody was looking at multifamily deals, and right now everybody's a little worried about multifamily deals because we were overbuilt. We had so many, I forget how many thousands of units are coming online here in the next 24 months. One of my deals that I did, and I'm working with a client, they're building nearly 300 units on like 25,000 square feet. So it's a small little footprint going straight up 33 stories. And they're bringing that to market. That probably won't come to market for another 2-3 years. So hopefully in the cycle, it's just about the right time, when the market. What I heard recently from the Miami Association of Realtors that you guys might have heard, that we're still getting, as state of Florida, 1,350 people daily still migrating to Florida. But we also know that a lot of people, like you guys highlighted one of your past podcasts, they're leaving Miami because of there's a shift in the population because of cost of living. So a lot of people are leaving Miami-Dade and so forth. So that multifamily is still this kind of, I would say, a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle to find out as far as like overbuild or underbuild. It's always the chicken or the egg. Do we build more, or we need this, or it's one of those things. So I think that's one that we should keep our eye on a little bit. Office, going back to the office story, from what I'm seeing a lot of interest from people looking for office space because we're underbuilt, I would say, for office space. And so now all the brand new shiny towers, a lot of these cranes that we're seeing, but they're demanding really high prices. So where are those spilling out from Brickell to places like Coral Gables and Aventura that are getting some of the spillage of the people that can't really necessarily afford $150 per square foot for a shiny new office building to infill some of these offices. I just heard that Pitbull has an office building going up in Wynwood that just got approved. It's fairly small, I think more directed to the creatives, but it's also a small footprint from my understanding. It's only 8 stories and so forth, but so different type of creative and office. And still trying to understand from the Outlook conference, we talked, people are still trying to understand what the office environment looks like. Are we going to the office 5 days a week? This hybrid, scenario. So that's all still being played out. So there's a lot of things that may be built a certain way that might have to switch. If you go back to, between 2010 and 2020, if you go to San Francisco, a lot of people wanted to build these offices that had pool tables and ping pong tables and all these spaces and so forth. And so that was to keep the young tech minds having space so they can have some release with some ping pong or pool table, and then go back to the desk and stay there till 11 o'clock at night or something like that. So it's an ever evolving kind of situation. So and then the deals that I personally am seeing more of are either what I'm actually seeing most recently, I would say in the last 6 months, have been more of like owner users looking for purchasing their space. So they're not necessarily the small 1,000 square foot flex, users. There's a 30,000 square foot manufacturer in North Miami, been there for 25 years, and was told recently that his lease is not going to be renewed. He never thought that would ever happen to him, but the owner that bought the building is going to tear down that building and turn it into multifamily.
Yeah, the dirt's worth too much. Yeah.
Right. He has a couple of years to move 30,000 square feet to some new location later in life when he thought he was going to be slowing down. So what does he do? And, those are some of the things. And he's like, hey, do I build a building? I was like, hey, well, you're a manufacturer for this type of product. I don't know if you want to get into the development side of things, but he wants to own. He doesn't want a future generation to have to worry about, looking for something to lease. I've heard that story now a couple of times, as well as some other outside manufacturer. I have another manufacturer I talked to out of New Jersey. They have 60,000 square feet of manufacturing in New Jersey, and they want to build 75 to 100,000 square feet here somewhere, and they want to own. But at least their parameters, they have 2 hours from the Miami area that they're willing to go, because they have their offices here, but they could put manufacturing somewhere else. So those are the type of things that I'm seeing. So are we underbuilt for those guys? I don't know, because a lot of big box industrial are looking, they're still vacant and trying to fill in some of those big box industrial. But we have some people that are now looking for 50 to 100,000 square feet for their own purpose, but they want to own. So they're competing against some of the institutional quality type players out there, and being more of an family-owned business kind of thing.
Correct. Spencer Levy this week on the Weekly Take did a whole analysis of industrial and where he thinks that is and where it's going. And I think especially in Florida with our Live Local Act, I think we're going to have, even though we are overbuilt right now, especially for the big, 36 clear space, but for other stuff like the smaller bay warehouses or the small individual manufacturers, I think we're going to run into some big constraints there, right? Because you are bidding against not only institutional money, but with the Live Local Act, so much of that dirt, if you build multifamily, is, now they're trying to sell it as if it were a multifamily site, not an industrial site. So I think that you bring up a really interesting point, in that we are going to see constraints in the future, especially given how much our ports and airports do in terms of cargo and shipments and trade, in addition to all of the manufacturing that's being on-sourced back into the United States.
Absolutely. And as I once heard, those are growing pains, which are good things for Southeast Florida, versus some of the other areas that everybody's leaving, and they don't know what to do with these empty buildings, and now they're being sold at pennies on the dollar kind of thing. We're on the opposite end of that spectrum, and so luckily those are yes, they are issues, but they're, I would say, not good issues, but they're better than having the alternative of, what do we do now? We don't have anybody here to take the space.
I wanted to ask you, you've done a really good job of branding yourself as Ruben the Cuban, and you mentioned Bob Knackle, and he's done a great job of branding. And I think personal branding is a newer concept in commercial real estate than it is in residential. So tell me how important personal branding is in commercial real estate today.
I think, in my opinion, and in my career, branding has been huge for me. I was fortunate enough that my grandmother named my father Ruben Ruban, and I became Ruben Ruban Jr. And I know, Fernando, I don't always put the junior, and I know you gave me some slack about that. Yeah. the just the starting off with my name, Ruben Ruban, I've always had kind of like a little bit of a brand. Most people, it's like Ruben Ruben, or if you remember the song back in the 60s and 70s, Ruben Ruben. I've been thinking all the places. I remember like my first grade teacher used to sing that all the time, and so branding for me has always been, I guess, a part of something innate with me. As I said, when the Dart Man, again, branding, and he's huge on branding, gave me he started introducing me around Chicago as Ruben the Cuban, and people would remember that. I guess also, I've always had a knack of having a cigar in my mouth and a hat on, so that it was like, oh, there goes Ruben the Cuban, and so for me, it's been a big part of my career, and I do believe, especially as we grow and as we are more in a digital age where people do see you and you can have presence online and in person and via many different mediums, having something to distinguish yourself in a sense of a brand, people will associate that brand with a certain level of something. It could be good, bad, or indifferent. I'm sure there's some names that we can mention, and the first thought of something is like, oh, that's a bad connotation or something. Or in some other names, you're like, oh, that's a great connotation or a great name. Same thing happens with your branding. So that's why branding, you have to be careful. Make sure you pick something that's you. I would say make sure the branding is not fake, because there's a lot of people that will try to fake a brand and try to be something that they're not, and that eventually will show. And I think part of the branding, especially in commercial real estate, is just it's just something to help people understand or realize who you are and connect that. But again, you still have providing a certain service. As much as I love cigars, I don't sell cigars. And I've had a lot of people like, "Yeah, you're selling cigars." And I had cigars. I put a little band on it, and it said Ruben the Cuban, because I hand out a lot of cigars as part of. Instead of giving pens and hats away, I give cigars out. And they're like, "Oh, are you selling cigars?" I was like, "No, but I'll give you a cigar. Here's my QR code, and call me up if you have some needs. That kind of thing." Yeah, so it's important, and I think it's something. I did not take any. I didn't pay any agency or anything like that to help craft that. It's just something I've been at for a while, and it does take time. It's not something that I think would happen overnight, kind of thing. So it does take a little bit of time, and just stick with it. Find something that's you, and stick along with it.
Yeah, that's consistency is so important. Fernando preaches that a lot. We always say you've got to be consistent if you think you're going to get, overnight fame on Instagram, with 3 posts. It's,
Yeah.
Unless you have some video that goes viral. And again, to your point, that could be good or bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, most likely bad.
Yeah, if it's right.
Most likely if it's viral overnight, it's not
that's usually not a good thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why you hear about these kids now trying to go on these high rises all over the city to trying to get more and more viral, because just dancing on TikTok no longer does it.
Now you have to
jump up.
No. Let's not put that out.
Yeah.
No. I'm just saying it's people looking for those viral things, and they're in search of trying to get viral, trying to find that instant fame. They're doing some really crazy things that should not be done.
Right.
So I guess if we tie that into the commercial real estate, so I think when protecting your brand, you don't want to go do something crazy just so people say, "Oh, look at this person." Because the reality is, I have some people I know, some other brokers that told me, it's like, I've got this client, he's 80 years old, and he found me on TikTok, and he follows my TikTok. And what they do is they take their phone as they're doing a walkthrough, they videotape this, and they're literally narrating what they're looking for. Hey, look at the ceiling height, some water damage, I don't know, whatever it is about a certain building. And they just do a little video about what they look at, and they just consistently do it. And you never know. You have an investor that says, hey, this guy knows what he's looking for, and he knows he has a good eye to look out for a building. And that's when this guy gets a phone call from the investor. Not because he went in there and tried to set something on fire and jump over it. I don't know. It's different things. So I guess what you do it makes a big difference. But
yeah.
Sorry.
Well, no, listen,
No,
for
it's
sure.
awesome.
And what you do consistently, to your point, it's really what matters. So are there any other, I know you mentioned how important it is to be able to build relationships. Obviously the subtitle of this podcast is Demystifying Commercial Real Estate. So we have some in the audience that are young brokers. Are there any other tips that you want to provide for them, things that they want to focus their attention? I think we live in a world where there's so much information out there that it is overwhelming, and what people lack is perspective and focus. Where do I focus my attention on? And so we'd love your perspective on that.
I often tell, especially people newer to the business, use the tools in your toolbox. So what do I mean by that? As the overwhelming information that you just mentioned, especially like in the CCIM world, people often say, oh, I can't calculate an IRR or unleveraged IRR or what's the NOI, all these acronyms that we use on a daily basis. And they're newer to the business and they're like, how do we do that? And they get very intimidated by that. I'm like, it's okay. Doesn't mean you have to know that off the cuff and so forth. Use what you got. If what you got is a smile and, hey, I'm willing to work really hard and provide you the best service and learn that, use that. If you want to, I'm working with a team or have a more of a senior person I'm working with, and I'm setting up meetings for us to go together and learn from that, use that. I think people, when they're getting started, often get analysis paralysis, and they're afraid to say something because they're not sure if it's going to be right or wrong and so forth. A lot of what we say, and I think a lot of what we do is a little bit of an opinion. There's an art and a science. And so, the science, you can have a certain formula to get the NOI, but the stuff that goes into that formula could be the art part, because if I'm putting in a certain, I'm not putting in a vacancy rate to get the NOI, or I'm putting in only a 2% vacancy rate, and Jennifer thinks it's a 10% vacancy rate, we're both going to end up with an NOI, but it's going to be a different NOI because of the stuff that we put into it. And that's the art part. It's something that I would say, use what you got. Don't be afraid. We all may make mistakes. If you make a mistake, own it. It's okay. You can be like, you know what? I failed to see the vacancy rate, or I mistakenly put this rate thinking it's that rate. And it's okay. I think most people that, in my experience, rather hear from me that, hey, I'm correcting this and I found this, or I'm sorry, versus, oh, I'm the expert. You have to take this, and this is the Bible. The other thing, something I learned early on my career, I was working with a developer that super experienced, decades in the business. He was a CPA by training. He took a company public on the development side, industrial. And he told me, Ruben, if a deal doesn't make sense on one sheet of paper, it doesn't make sense. So it doesn't, because I remember trying to show up with like a 10-page spreadsheet, because back then I couldn't email it. I had to print out these spreadsheets in this legal size paper with 2-point font that you can barely see. And he goes, Ruben, if a deal doesn't make sense on one sheet of paper, clearly, it probably won't make sense. So let's not overcomplicate as much as information and overwhelming and all these stats and the data that's out there, demographics. And again, CCIM is based on all that and is based on learning that and how to leverage and use that. But it doesn't mean that you have to necessarily, show that off at every minute and every deal, every conversation.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm laughing because I had a similar experience with an investor, and he was trying to make a deal, and it included the purchase of a business and real estate. And we're in a ventanita where, this is Miami, we're in a ventanita somewhere in Doral having cafecito. He asked the lady if he can borrow her pen, and they had a brown paper bag. And so he took that brown paper bag and just broke down the entire deal while we were waiting to get cafecito. And he did all the numbers, and we were following through, and he goes like, yeah, we can make this happen. And he always told me, and he told me this, he says, if I can't make this deal make sense in the back of a brown paper bag, then there's no amount of data that you could give me to tell me that it's a good deal. And look, it worked out. So, it's incredible. It really is how we have all these complexity, but then really the ability to bring it down to its more essential core is such an important aspect of this business and of any business for sure.
To me, the complexity is more the big picture stuff, right? So all that information and all those pages are the overview. And then the actual deal is the brown paper bag or the one piece of paper, because that's those are the basics, right? And that's the beautiful thing about commercial real estate is basically if the numbers or the deal works on one piece of paper, chances are it's going to get done versus an emotional, which is more of a residential real estate thing, right? Where it's a little bit more emotional and all the data in the world and the numbers and doing it on a brown paper bag. If the emotion isn't there, probably that deal isn't going to happen.
For sure. Let me tell you, since we started with music, let's end it with music. One of the things that I always find great being in your presence is that you have a very relaxed way of being. You make people very comfortable, very much at ease, and I think that's just innate within you. So I wonder, what music do you listen to, during the day? What gets you pumped? What gets you relaxed? What gets you in a great mood? I mean, you always look like you have a great vibe about you and you're in a good mood all the time. Definitely is something that you are portraying out there. It's part of your personal brand too.
Yeah.
Because
and
I think it's part of,
You're chill even after a couple of cafecitos, which to me, I'm like bouncing off the walls. So.
I mean, maybe I have too many of those cafecitos, so it doesn't have the same effect.
Could be so.
Me too.
Yeah. Music, I am all over the place. So when I was very young, I was classically trained. So I love classical music. My wife actually is very classically trained. She started playing music at age 10, and
wow.
She's a music teacher today in Miami. Well, she's at a charter school, but here in Miami, she's a music teacher. So music in our home is always playing. In fact, right now for this, because we're recording, I turned the music off. Otherwise, music's always on. And it varies from playlists that has, very light classical type music to Pitbull and Mark Anthony. That I would say probably what really gets me going is the going to the Miami vibe, the Pitbull, Mark Anthony, throw in some Shakira in there and so forth, like that, Carlos Vives, that Latin pop music almost. Yeah. It's kind of the thing. I grew up listening to a lot of Michael Jackson, playing the bass. I'm a big jazz guy also. I love jazz. Like the smooth jazz kind of stuff. I also like the old classic, bebop type jazz, right. Kind of thing. My style of musically playing is like a Latin funk is what I play. I play a lot of church.
Yeah.
And then when I play at church, they often, I have a hard time standing still. So believe it or not, I'm playing and I'm literally dancing all over the stage playing. And I'm supposed to be directing people with a microphone. I got to remember, I got to get back to the microphone to say whatever I want to say. So I don't know if that answers the question.
It does. It brought images of Ed Calle into my mind when you mentioned that, for sure. So that's wonderful. Ruben, we can't thank you enough for taking the time to sit between two chairs today, and this has been highly enjoyable.
The honor is all mine. Again, congratulations to you two. You guys are doing an amazing, consistent. You're always there. Look forward to on my podcast list. It always says, "Hey, new updated." It comes out there. I believe was it Thursday at 3:05.
You got it. Absolutely.
So you see, you guys have it. You have it down to a science. So keep it going. What you guys provide to not just the community here in South Florida, but at large, people that want to learn about the CRE and learn about the commercial real estate industry. It's amazing. So thank you guys for being supportive of CCIM Miami. Thank you for being supportive of the community. And keep on chugging. And if there's anything I could ever do, please, I'm only a phone call away.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Ruben. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this other episode. We will catch you on the next one. Bye, Jennifer.
Bye, Fernando.